Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I never thought I'd be writing this post, but after everything that happened with my HOA and the aftermath that followed, I need to get this off my chest. This happened about 6 months ago, and the legal dust has finally settled enough for me to share the whole story. For context, I work as a project manager for a mid-sized tech company. My job has taught me the value of documentation, following procedures, and keeping detailed records of everything. This attention to detail would prove absolutely crucial in what was about to unfold. We live in one of those picture-perfect suburban neighborhoods where every lawn looks like it belongs in a magazine. The HOA here is obsessed with maintaining appearances. They have rules about everything: how long your grass can be, when you can put out trash cans, what color your mailbox should be, even the exact shade of white your fence needs to be painted. Monthly dues are steep, but the trade-off is supposed to be living in this pristine environment where property values stay high. My 10-year-old son loves riding his bike around our quiet neighborhood streets. The speed limit is 15 miles per hour, and there's hardly any traffic since it's all residential. He's a careful kid, always wears his helmet, and sticks to the side of the road like we taught him. On weekends, you can usually see kids playing outside, riding bikes, walking dogs. It's that kind of family-friendly community. The HOA board has 5 members, and one of them is this woman who drives a massive luxury SUV and has lived here for over 15 years. She's the type who considers herself the unofficial neighborhood watch coordinator. I'd seen her before, always stopping to lecture people about their hedge trimming or pointing out violations in the community guidelines. She has this way of speaking that makes everything sound like an official proclamation, even when she's just complaining about someone's Christmas decorations being up too long. It was a Saturday afternoon in early spring. The weather was perfect, so my son decided to take his bike out for a ride around the neighborhood. I was inside working on some weekend projects when I heard the screech of tires followed by a loud crash. My heart dropped immediately because I knew my son was out there somewhere. I ran outside and saw the scene that still gives me nightmares. This HOA board member's massive SUV was stopped in the middle of the street, and my son was on the ground next to his mangled bicycle. She had clipped him while he was riding along the edge of the road. The bike was completely destroyed, and my son was crying and holding his arm. But here's the part that still makes my blood boil. Before I could even reach my son, before anyone had checked if he was seriously injured, this woman rolled down her window and started yelling, not asking if he was okay, not apologizing, but screaming about her vehicle. She was going on about how much damage had been done to her bumper and how expensive it would be to fix. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My child was hurt and on the ground, and she was worried about her car's paint job. When I got to my son, I could see he had road rash on his arms and legs, and his wrist looked swollen. He was shaking and clearly in shock. I immediately called 911 while trying to comfort him, but the whole time this woman kept yelling from her car. Then she got out and said something I'll never forget. She looked at my injured son and declared that he had asked for it. According to her, he wasn't wearing a high-visibility vest and was blocking the flow of traffic in a residential zone. She actually used the phrase blocking the flow of traffic about a 10-year-old on a bicycle in a neighborhood with a 15 miles per hour speed limit. By this time, neighbors started coming out to see what happened. The woman immediately tried to take control of the situation, telling people this was an HOA matter and they should go back inside. She was speaking in this official tone like she had some kind of authority over the whole situation. When I asked for her insurance information, she refused. She told me the board would handle what she called my nuisance of a child. I couldn't believe the audacity. My son was still sitting on the ground, clearly hurt, and she was treating this like some kind of HOA violation rather than a car accident. I had my phone out the entire time and recorded everything. I also took photos of where her SUV was positioned, the damage to the bike, and my son's injuries. Something in my gut told me I was going to need all of this later. The paramedics arrived and checked my son over. His wrist was sprained, and he had multiple cuts and bruises, but thankfully nothing was broken. They recommended taking him to the emergency room for x-rays just to be safe. The police showed up too, but here's where things got complicated. Since this happened on what they considered a private neighborhood road, they said it was primarily a civil matter. They took a basic report but told me I'd need to work through insurance companies and possibly civil court for any resolution. The HOA board member gave her information to the police but made it clear she wasn't admitting fault. She kept insisting my son had violated some kind of traffic safety protocol by not wearing reflective gear. It was absolutely ridiculous, but she said it with such conviction that I started to worry she might actually believe her own nonsense. We spent the rest of the afternoon at the hospital. The x-rays confirmed the sprain, and they cleaned up all his cuts and bandaged him up. My son was pretty traumatized by the whole experience. He kept asking why the lady was so mean to him when he was hurt. That evening, I started documenting everything. I wrote down exactly what happened, printed out all the photos I'd taken, and made copies of the medical records from the hospital. I also researched our HOA's insurance policies and governance structure. My project management background was kicking in, and I knew organization would be key to whatever came next. The next Monday, I called the HOA board member's insurance company to file a claim. I figured this would be straightforward. Car hits bike, driver's insurance pays for medical bills and property damage. But when I called, they told me no claim had been filed from their end. Apparently, she hadn't even reported the accident to her insurance company. I filed the claim myself as the victim, providing all my documentation and photos. The insurance adjuster seemed professional and said they'd investigate. But then, something strange happened. 2 days later, I found an official HOA notice in my mailbox. It was a formal warning for endangering the safety of the neighborhood through my child. According to this notice, allowing my son to ride his bike without proper safety equipment had created a hazardous situation that resulted in property damage to an HOA board member's vehicle. I read this thing 3 times because I couldn't believe it was real. They were actually trying to make this my fault. The notice went on to say that future violations could result in fines or other disciplinary action through the HOA. That same evening, the HOA president called me. He had this smooth, diplomatic voice and started by saying how sorry he was about the accident. Then he suggested I might want to reconsider filing the police report and insurance claim. He said the board member involved was a pillar of the community who had contributed so much to the neighborhood over the years. He told me that pursuing this matter could tank property values for everyone and create unnecessary drama in our peaceful community. As an alternative, he offered to waive our HOA dues for the next year and maybe throw in some money for a new bicycle. The whole conversation felt like a bribe, but he was being very careful with his words. He kept emphasizing how this was just a suggestion and how the board wanted to find a solution that worked for everyone. Here's where my documentation obsession paid off. I told him I appreciated the offer and asked if he could send me the details in writing so I could review everything carefully. I made it sound like I was seriously considering their proposal. He seemed relieved and said he'd have something to me by the end of the week. I think he thought he'd successfully intimidated me into dropping the whole thing. But I wasn't dropping anything. Instead, I started researching HOA law and insurance policies. I discovered some interesting things about how HOA board member liability works, and what happens when board members use their positions to interfere with legitimate insurance claims. The written offer arrived exactly when promised. It was even worse than what he'd described on the phone. The document essentially blamed my son for the accident and framed their offer as a generous gesture to resolve my child's liability for the damage to the board member's vehicle. But here's the beautiful part. By involving the HOA board in covering up one member's car accident, they had potentially made the entire organization liable for conspiracy to obstruct justice and harassment. I realized they weren't just trying to protect one board member. They were willing to use the full weight of the HOA to victim blame a 10-year-old child. I immediately contacted a personal injury attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. When I showed him all my documentation and the written offer from the board, his eyes lit up. He explained that what the board had done was potentially much worse than the original car accident. We didn't just sue the board member who hit my son. We filed a massive lawsuit against the entire HOA for conspiracy to obstruct justice, harassment, and violation of their fiduciary duty to homeowners. The lawyer explained that by using their official positions to cover up a crime and intimidate victims, they had opened up the entire organization to liability. During the discovery phase, things got really interesting. My attorney subpoenaed all the HOA board's communications related to the accident. What we found was shocking. There was an email thread between board members from several weeks before the accident. In these emails, the woman who hit my son had been complaining about kids riding bikes and playing in the streets. She actually wrote that someone needed to scare these kids off the street before someone gets hurt. Other board members had responded with laughing emojis and comments about how the children were diminishing the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood. The attorney was amazed. We had written evidence that showed this wasn't just a careless accident, but part of a pattern of hostility toward children in the neighborhood. The board member had been actively looking for ways to discourage kids from playing outside. When the HOA's insurance company saw these emails, they immediately dropped the organization's coverage. They said the board's attempts to cover up a vehicular incident and intimidate victims constituted intentional wrongdoing that voided their policy. This created a financial nightmare for the entire neighborhood. Without insurance coverage, the HOA would have to pay all legal fees and any settlement out of their reserves and special assessments to homeowners. The board had to send out a notice explaining that monthly dues would need to increase dramatically to cover their legal costs. The neighborhood erupted. Suddenly, everyone knew what had happened and how the board had handled it. People were furious that their dues were going up because the board had tried to cover up a board member hitting a child with her car. A special community meeting was called. The room was packed with angry homeowners who wanted answers. I brought my laptop and played the video I'd recorded right after the accident. Seeing this woman yell at my injured son while he sat crying on the ground was devastating. You could hear people gasping and some were visibly upset. Then my attorney read excerpts from the email thread about scaring kids off the streets. The room went completely silent. Parents were looking at each other in disbelief, realizing that a board member had been actively hostile toward their children. The board tried to defend themselves, saying they were just trying to protect the community's interests. But homeowners weren't buying it. One after another, people stood up to express their outrage. Several families mentioned that they'd noticed this particular board member being aggressive toward their kids, but hadn't realized it was part of a larger pattern. By the end of the meeting, there was a unanimous vote of no confidence in the entire board. Plans were immediately put in motion to hold emergency elections and completely replace the leadership. But the legal consequences were just getting started. The board member who hit my son was facing personal liability since the HOA's insurance wouldn't cover her anymore. Her own auto insurance was fighting the claim, arguing that her emails showed intentional misconduct rather than simple negligence. She ended up having to hire her own attorney, and the financial pressure was enormous. Her legal bills were mounting, and she was facing the possibility of a six-figure judgment for my son's medical bills, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. The whole situation was affecting her personally, too. Word had spread throughout the neighborhood and even to surrounding communities about what had happened. Her reputation was completely destroyed. Meanwhile, the lawsuit against the HOA was moving forward. The new board that got elected was much more reasonable and wanted to settle quickly to stop the financial bleeding. They were horrified by what the previous board had done and wanted to make things right. We reached a settlement that covered all of my son's medical expenses, replaced his bicycle with a top-of-the-line model, and included a substantial amount for his college fund. The HOA also had to implement new policies about board member conduct and child safety in the neighborhood. The individual lawsuit against the board member took longer to resolve. Her legal fees kept mounting, and the evidence against her was overwhelming. Eventually, she agreed to a settlement that was large enough that she had to put her house on the market to pay it. It was surreal watching the moving trucks pull up to her house about 8 months after the accident. My son was back to riding his bike around the neighborhood by then, though we'd moved to a different street where there was even less traffic. As her moving truck was pulling away, my son and I happened to be outside. He was riding his new bike, and I was holding a copy of the reformed HOA bylaws that had been passed by the new board. The new rules included specific protections for children playing in the neighborhood and strict protocols for how board members should handle any incidents. I waved the document as she drove past for the last time. I'm not usually petty, but after everything she'd put my family through, it felt like appropriate closure. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for yourself and the importance of documentation. If I hadn't recorded everything and kept such detailed records, the board probably would have succeeded in covering the whole thing up and making us take the blame. My son recovered completely from his injuries, though it took a while for him to feel comfortable riding his bike again. The settlement money we received has been invested for his future education, and we took a really nice family vacation once everything was resolved. The neighborhood is actually a much better place now. The new HOA board is focused on maintaining the community without the authoritarian attitude of the previous leadership. Kids play outside freely, and there's a much friendlier atmosphere among neighbors. But what really satisfies me is knowing that someone who used her position to bully and intimidate families finally faced real consequences. She spent years treating the neighborhood like her personal kingdom, and when she actually hurt a child, she tried to use her authority to escape responsibility. The legal system worked exactly the way it's supposed to in this case. Documentation, persistence, and good legal representation made sure that justice was served. Sometimes the bad guys really do lose in the end. The whole ordeal took almost a year to fully resolve, but it was worth every moment to see the accountability that followed, and knowing that the neighborhood is safer for all the kids who live here makes everything we went through feel completely worthwhile. Looking back, I'm grateful that I had the skills and temperament to handle this situation methodically. A lot of people might have been intimidated by the HOA's attempts to blame them and cover things up, but sometimes you have to fight back, especially when someone hurts your child and then tries to make it your fault. The woman who hit my son probably thought her position on the board would protect her from consequences. She learned the hard way that being in a position of authority doesn't give you the right to hurt people and escape accountability. In fact, it just means you have further to fall when justice finally catches up with you. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A little bit of backstory to help explain some of the later facts. In the military, every piece of equipment gets preventative maintenance done on it to maintain it in good working condition. In the Navy, we have a very well laid out maintenance system with step-by-step instructions on how to do every bit of maintenance, with instructions so simple a monkey could do it. Part of these maintenance procedures lists required tools, parts, materials, and test equipment, and they are also extremely specific, detailing the length requirement of your screwdrivers, the brand of your gauges, etc. The management of this system the Navy uses is called the Maintenance and Material Management System, 3M, or Planned Maintenance System, PMS. As an electrician, we owned all electrical distribution equipment on board, and for jobs without an electrical training background, we also owned the actual equipment, so the electronics technicians with electrical training could maintain their own electrical equipment. But the cooks, culinary specialists, without an electrical background, relied on us to maintain their equipment for them. Now, if you've ever used a commercial flat-top griddle before, you know you set it to a specific temperature you want the cooktop heated to, and not a 0 to 9 inches dial like your stove at home. Part of maintaining the griddle was checking the calibration of this temperature setting once every year or two. I forget how often this check was, but it wasn't a frequent check. Relatively early on when I got on board the ship, young EMFN, junior electrician, Gwen BD 94 was assigned to do this maintenance check, so I gathered all of my tools, parts, materials, etc. In doing so, I couldn't find the proper temperature sensor for our calibrated temperature gauge. We had the round-tip ambient temperature probe for use in the ovens, but not the flat-tip surface temperature probe for use on a griddle. I asked a different supervisor to my favorite supervisor for help, and he couldn't find it either, so we ordered a new one, and he said he'd take care of the paperwork for the maintenance check. Being new and unfamiliar with the system, I let it go, and never questioned when the maintenance check disappeared from the maintenance list the next week, meaning someone accomplished it, hint hint nudge nudge, and all was good. The next time this maintenance check came up due, we were on deployment, and it was again assigned to me. By this time, we had a new supervisor, and I was now EM3, slightly less junior electrician, Gwen BD 94, a bit more knowledgeable. I looked where we kept all our calibrated equipment and couldn't find the flat-top temperature probe I knew it needed, so I asked my supervisor. He found we had one on order but didn't know that we had one in the shop and told me to figure it out. Knowing that was an unlawful order and would amount to lying about the check and could bite me in the ass later, I said I wouldn't do the maintenance without the right equipment, and since he couldn't lawfully order me to, we started putting a note on the check that the tools were on order and delaying it. This went on for about 2-3 months until the check was about to go red, move out of periodicity, and cause negative numbers on out maintenance reports. And I was again ordered to figure it out, or I'd be written up. I refused, and raised the same issue to my boss's boss, and we tore the shop apart trying to find the right equipment but couldn't find it. So he told me not to worry about it. Later that week, while I was on watch as a roving watchstander, allowed to walk around the ship, and even required to, after dinner one evening, I saw a newer, more junior electrician, let's call him EMF Timmy, even more junior than I initially was electrician, in the galley, kitchen, working on the griddle. I took a step into the galley and asked him what he was doing, and lo and behold, he was doing the maintenance check. I asked him what temperature probe he was using, and he showed me the one for the oven. I explained to him the issue and told him if he signed the maintenance check, it would be gun decking, lying on official paperwork, and he could get in trouble, but let him make his own decisions as an adult. He decided to continue doing the check. I giggled and continued on with my watch. After my watch, it was nearly 10 p.m., so I went to bed for the night. About an hour later, I got woken up, being told my supervisor needed me in the galley. I signed, figuring it was about the check, and I was going to get that earlier threatened write-up. After getting dressed and making it to the galley, the entire electrical shop was in the galley, troubleshooting the griddle. You see, EMFA Timmy got to the step in the PMS where it said to use a screwdriver to adjust a dial until the thermometer read the same temperature indicated by the set temperature. When he measured it, it was off by about 150 degrees, so he kept turning up the heat. Eventually, it was hot enough to melt the griddle's built-in overtemp protection device, instantly shutting the stovetop off. Turns out, he did need that temperature probe. I was tasked with helping come up with a solution to fix it, because the griddle was a critical piece of equipment for the cooks, and we had no replacement parts to fix it. I asked EMF Timmy if he ever finished the last steps of the maintenance card. turning the grill off, putting it back together, reporting completion of the PMS. He told me he hadn't. I turned to my boss and said since the maintenance check I explicitly advised against doing without the proper tools was still ongoing, and I was informed I could do the maintenance or be written up, I'd stick with my original decision and refuse to do the maintenance. He could write me up in the morning during working hours, but in the meantime, I was going back to bed. Have a nice night. In the morning, I did indeed get written up, but for the insubordination, not for refusing the maintenance check, while my boss's boss looked on with the biggest crap-eating grin at me for holding my ground, and my supervisor was pissed at me. Turns out, I was right, and we couldn't do that maintenance check without the right equipment. This remains one of my write-ups I am least ashamed to have ever gotten, and I'd take it again in a heartbeat to give a giant "I told you so" middle finger to idiot middle managers. I later found an electronic record of the counseling chit my supervisor got for tasks people with doing maintenance without the proper equipment, because I laid out that this was a known issue we didn't have the right probe for years and threw his ass deep under the bus. Hated the guy. We got the right probe in about 6 months later. The next one is an entitled people story. So I moved to the Midwest from California 6 years ago to basically start over and be closer to my mom. I moved into an apartment about 8 miles away from my mom and stepdad. My half-sister, we share a dad, but my mom is her stepmom, moved here with her 3 kids a few years before I did. Let's call her Cindy. She was going through a nasty divorce and needed a new place to live, so my mom offered to let her sublet a house she and my dad got back in 2006 before they divorced. Cindy and her 3 kids moved in probably around 2013. I might have the year wrong, but I think I'm close. In 2013, the kids would have been 5, 7, and 23. My mom and stepdad did a lot for Cindy, and over the years it became clear she was taking advantage of their kindness. They paid thousands of dollars for her divorce lawyer, which she never offered to pay back. They gave her a used car, which she went around and sold without giving them any money for it. Not once did she pay rent on time. My mom oftentimes would have to ask about 3 weeks into the month where the rent was. She claimed she couldn't afford the house with her child support and alimony, but she refused to get a job for most of the time she was living there. For about 5 years, she refused to work. In 2019, Cindy had gotten a job in sales selling carpet. She still claimed the rent was too much for her, and my mom often had to subsidize her. So my mom tells her she'd like to sell the house, and she'd give Cindy a year to move out. My mom would send her links for places to rent, but would never get a response. Cindy wasn't making an effort to move out. A year goes by and my mom confronts her about it, extending the move-out date by another 3 months. I didn't witness this exchange, but according to other family members, Cindy was livid. I once visited Cindy at work, this is now 2020, and she told me it was illegal of my mom to force her to move out during a moratorium. She left my mom's house a wreck. I helped my mom and stepdad clean everything. There was cat poop in almost every room, and even a pile of crap on the toilet seat that my stepdad cleaned up. She also left a lot of her belongings there, including large stuff too, a huge fake plant that went up nearly to the ceiling, a desk, foosball table, etc., which my mom and I either sold for her or packed up and gave to her. She found an apartment for herself and her 3 kids kind of in between me and mom. Her kids at this point would be 12, 14, and 30. Now Cindy's oldest, we'll call him Garrett, is an alcoholic who struggles holding on to a job. He'd constantly get into fights with his mother and then would come stay with me for a night or 2 before returning home. Well, Cindy permanently kicked him out in 2023, and he ended up living in his car. His AC in his car quit working that summer, so I took him in. He was sort of an ass while he stayed with me, eating my food and never replacing it, complaining about my messes when he was living with me rent-free, etc. One weekend, I noticed $60 missing from my wallet. I confronted him about it in a text, and he admitted to taking it. I didn't know what to do. I was working full-time and had a part-time job on the side to make extra money. I couldn't afford to have someone living with me who steals. I left my partner's place to go home to talk to him about it. I had told my mom my concerns prior to confronting him, asking her for advice. When I made it home, my mom had texted him saying she couldn't believe he'd steal from me. He tried turning the tables around on me, angry that I had told my mom. I remained calm, but I did call him out for his behavior. The next day, I threw him out in a text when I wasn't home. Big mistake. Over the next few months, I noticed different things missing. Books, board and card games, DVDs, even my vibrator. Since this happened, I was able to take Garrett to small claims, and he paid me $400. He told me he stole my stuff because he was mad that I kicked him out. No remorse or apology. He acts like he's the victim and that I wronged him. Cindy was embarrassed that I took him in and tried spreading lies about me. She even tries spreading lies about my mom, claiming she was only given a couple of months to move out. Thankfully, no one in the family believes her. My mom is still in contact with both of them, but I'm not. The next one is an entitled people story.
I, F, 5'10", work in a parts department. We have a technician here, M, 5'2"-ish, who is a miserable human being. A bully to anyone and everyone. Consistently rude for no reason, demanding and demeaning. Our department is under massive construction. As such, we have very little storage and the department is a mess. No trip hazard, but cluttered. I've worked hard at keeping floor space safe and clear, as I'm going to be wheelchair bound shortly due to reconstructive surgery to fix a lifelong problem with my feet/legs. Now, this doesn't directly affect him, as no one other than authorized parts personnel are authorized in our storage areas. This technician has been horrible, especially to me, especially since construction started and we are short-staffed. If we don't have parts immediately ready for him, he yells and swears. He complained about the mess, and now I have to have every part on a shelf. Cue malicious compliance. Everyone in my department is around my height. We also have very tall shelving units. We never use the top of the units. I've now moved every common part needed by technicians to the top of our shelves. By stretching, all parts personnel are able to easily reach these parts. I've also gotten the Rude Tech exclusive permission for him to be able to come back and grab parts. The finale. We have a stepladder, hollow metal tube type. This is supposed to be for parts use, but Rude Tech constantly steals it, leaving it outside or where it shouldn't be. He hates asking for it and refuses to ever accept or ask for help reaching things. Remember the aforementioned construction? Well, we're pouring concrete today. The construction workers were more than happy to fill the hollow tubes of the ladder with new concrete. So now I get to watch this jerk, who's made his toxic masculinity everyone else's problem, lug this 60-pound ladder around, all because he couldn't just be a decent human. The next story is titled, Steal. Guilt is torturous. Anyone who works retail knows that shoplifting is a major problem. Depending on the company, how and when you can confront a shoplifter can vary. I'm a shift supervisor for a retail drugstore chain. This day one of my employees, Emp, unlocks the bathroom for a kid who looks to be about 10. A moment later, she hears paper ripping through the bathroom door. She could not enter due to her being female and a customer in the men's bathroom. After the boy leaves, Emp enters the men's bathroom and finds an empty Pokemon card box. She reports the box to me and points out the kid in pharmacy with his mom. Due to the circumstances, I feel the proper criteria and requirements have not been met for me to report the boy to his mom. The company has some strict policy about confronting shoplifters and has fired people for not following policy. I will not mention the policy here. However, I tell Emp that we are going to guilt the boy. If he is innocent, our plan will have no effect on him. If he's guilty, he's going to hurt. Part of working retail is to casually approach customers asking if they need help. I notice the boy and his mom browsing the vitamin aisle. I give Emp the box and tell her to go give them the casual customer service. Emp does it, and the boy freaks out, quickly saying, "They're fine and don't need anything." You could hear the fright in the boy's voice. I then see the boy and his mom in pharmacy. The mom is on her phone with what sounds like her insurance company. This usually means she's here to pick up a prescription, but there's a problem with the insurance. They'll be here for a few hours. My main task that morning was inventory. I would be walking all over the store for a few hours with my handheld, finding and counting certain items. We also have a device that plays security messages over the intercom. Press a button and a certain security message will play. We press it whenever we see a potential shoplifter, and randomly every 15 to 30 minutes to scare away potential shoplifters. I decide to carry that device, along with the empty box, with me. I go along doing my inventory. Whenever I walk past the boy, I make sure the box is in my hand closest to him. Sometimes I spin it on my finger. I wait the 15 to 30 minutes to press the security button, but I wait as I'm approaching the boy to press it. Every time the boy sees me, he gets the look of fright on his face. After about an hour, I see the boy whining to his mom about him being bored and when are they going to leave. The mom hands him some cash to buy some snacks. I inform my front cashier, FC, about the boy and hand him a Pokemon toy. FC places it on the counter, appearing as if a customer just left it there. When FC is ringing the boy up, he accidentally picks up the toy and asks the boy if it's his. The boy says no. FC later told me that the boy turned pale white and started shaking just at the mention of the word Pokemon. After buying his snacks, the boy is really pulling his mom's leg, wanting to get out of the store. The mom tells him she's busy and to please sit down and enjoy his snacks. The boy is doing everything possible to avoid seeing me. After 2 hours on the phone, the mom is finally able to get her prescription. The boy is walking as fast as he can without running. He wants out of the store. I don't know what happened to the boy afterwards, but I hope he learned his lesson about stealing and will never do it again. The next story is titled, Karen Calls 911 and Claims My Classic Car is Stolen, Steals My Keys, and Drives My Car into a River. I never thought I'd be having problems with my neighbors. I don't like intruding anyone's life or annoying anyone, but sometimes there's nothing you can do. This story is a little old, but it's worth listening. I had heard from other people who lived in the street next to me that my immediate neighbor, Jack, had a cold war ongoing with the previous resident of the house I now lived in. One of them even said that Jack was the reason the last resident decided to move away. He's incredibly petty, and he makes no effort to hide his jealousy. It's obvious that the fact that my house is the biggest on the street is the main reason he's horrible to anyone who lives in it. Jack is incredibly jealous. He has this tiny dog that has been trained to take a dump right in front of my gate every day. The dog is taken out for a walk before the sun rises, so no one can ever say that it's Jack's dog who does this, but that's evident as there's no one else who owns a pet dog on our street. And this was only the beginning. He tried to weld my gate, cut a tree I had in my front yard, and he tried breaking in multiple times. I saw him peeping through the gate, and he even tried scratching my car. But I was always paying attention, and I knew that's how Jack was. And I made sure I never screwed up in front of Jack in any aspect whatsoever, which wasn't very hard because I lead a straightforward life and everything that I own is because I worked hard for it. Right after I finished my high school, I started hustling to make a name for myself in the game creating sector. I juggled college and work, which allowed me to gain more experience than other people my age. This is how I managed to buy my own house at 22 and then a Jaguar E-Type at 24. I could clearly tell that he was jealous, and I can understand. He was much older than me, and he didn't have half of what I did. But the truth was that he was a drunk, and it seemed like he liked it. I don't know if he always did drugs, but I'm sure about alcohol. His eyes were always empty, and he was almost never able to walk straight. He shouldn't even be allowed to drive most days, and I know he's drunk half the time, even at his workplace. But he still refused to accept that just because he can't afford an expensive car, someone who works much harder than him could be. Jack was the first one to come talk to me when the car first came home. He went on to make a huge scene out of jealousy, and then accused me of stealing the car. The man had already decided that I couldn't possibly own something nicer than him fair and square, so he demanded that I hand over the keys. When I yelled at him and told him there's no way I'm letting him anywhere near my new car, he called the police. He first told them that I had stolen the car, but I was clearly unbothered as I had all the necessary documents. I even wanted them to come, just so I could prove it to him without a doubt that the car is mine. He was shocked when he saw that my name was on the documents. I really believe that seeing that the car was not actually mine was his biggest desire. He started telling all kinds of stupid things, trying to convince the cops that I was really a bad person. He told them that I did drugs and that I was drunk every day, which was funny coming from him. I should have realized that a man that spent so long brooding over my success would certainly have something up his sleeve. I'd have to admit that I was a little stunned when they found a small packet of white substance on my porch. I was terrified about what it could mean if the packet was cocaine, but once the policeman took me to the station and tested the substance, they discovered that it was just flour. Jack did get himself into a tight situation, but since there was no concrete evidence that he planted the flour on my porch, the police couldn't do anything more than extract a fine for false information. Once I had gotten back home, I went through the footage of my house's security camera. After hours of going through the same thing, I finally found video proof of Jack tampering with the chair on my porch and placing something near it. This meant I had everything I needed to get Jack into so much more trouble than just a fine. But going through footage for so long had tired me out. It didn't make sense that I had to sacrifice so much of my time just to bring someone else problems. If I did that, I'd be no different from Jack. So I decided to let it go. So I went to sleep. In the middle, I hear my car's engine going. I jump out and look out the window, and that's when I see Jack driving my car. I ran downstairs and I see the front door opened and a mess all around the living room. I quickly take out my phone and call the police. After I explain to them the whole thing, they come and pick me up. We follow Jack as I had a GPS tracker in my car. I can see that he keeps driving towards a river, but I'm not even thinking that he could be so mad as to do something like that. We were getting closer and closer to him, but we still arrived too late. My car was already sinking when I got out of the police car. I fell on my knees as I saw the car going deep in the river. I looked over to Jack, who was smiling, drunk. The police handcuffed him and took him to the police station. I sued him for everything he had done to me. And fortunately, I received money for my car, but the sad feeling was still there. I would visit the river from time to time, thinking of how I lost one of my most precious things because of an insane man. I never managed to find a car that looked exactly like that one, and so I stopped trying to replace it. I just bought a totally different car and went on. The only good thing was that Jack was going to be in jail for a long time. The next story is titled, A Poisoned Apple, a story from my days as a grad student in chemistry, late 1984 or early 1985. Reporting a revenge dispensed by another. First-year chemistry grad students shared a large multi-desk office that included a refrigerator for storing food. No chemicals. One morning, one of the other students discovered that overnight an apple he was keeping in the refrigerator had been stolen. After asking around to determine that none of us had taken it, he devised a revenge. He left a note in the refrigerator saying, as best I remember it all these years later, "The apple you stole yesterday had malic acid in it. You messed with the chemist at your own peril." The next day, a night janitor reported to the health center stating that he had been poisoned. But no punishment was meted out to the grad student poisoner. Malic acid is the naturally occurring chemical that makes apples taste tart, and the apple had not been adulterated. You mess with a chemist at your own peril. The last story is titled, She Should Have Been Nice to Me. I posted this on another subreddit, just want to know if I ever reacted. I'm a 23-year-old college student. Now, it's my second year in college. I was a C student in school, but now my grades are way better than before. Anyway, in my country, if a student wants to study in college, they have to get the MSAT exams, or SAT in other countries. And there's English, Math, Arabic exams. And we have to get the score the college wants in 2 years, or they will kick you out forever. So I've passed all the exams in 1 semester, and my score in the English exam was very high compared to the other students. It's my second language, and it's not perfect, I know. And, since it's a small college, I know a lot of students I was with in some classes, and I have a good relationship with them. We help each other and all that stuff. And one of the students that I consider one of my friends kept failing in the English exam. So as a good friend, I tried to help her. And sometimes I was even missing classes for her. I know that's stupid. So last semester, it was the last chance for her to pass the exam, and I doubt she was even studying for it. So 1 week till the exam, and while we were studying, she asked me if I could take the exam instead of her. Some students did it and got away with it. So after thinking about it, I agreed to take the exam. She will 100% pass the exam, so that happened in college, in the student's room. And there was another student we know, but she wasn't studying with us. And we ordered some food, and I went outside to get it. And when I came back, before entering the room, I heard her talking crap about me and laughing with the other student. She was mocking my accent and the way I'm trying to be more social with everyone. I wasn't like that before. But there was literally no reason for her to say that. And, of course, that hurts my feelings. And I was angry, but I didn't want her to know that I heard everything she said, and I'm 100% sure she said my name. So, after a week before the exam, I told her to bring me some coffee and donuts, because why not? I entered the exam room, thankfully no one noticed, and I was purposely answering the questions wrong, just random clicking sometimes. And when I finished and went outside, she was standing there holding the coffee like an idiot, and asked me how was it. And I said, "Congratulations, my friend, you no longer have to worry about the exam." Man, the smile on her face, lol. So, of course, she went home and didn't talk to me at all, because why should she? She got what she wants. Anyway, I didn't see her this semester since she got kicked out after 2 years of studying.
The next one is an entitled people story.
So, my ex-boyfriend was a lying, cheating piece of crap who gaslit me and took advantage of me financially. When I realized that he was cheating on me with multiple people, I hacked into his Grindr account, watched him arrange a sex date in our house, and showed up shortly after his date arrived. Walked in, asked his date if he fancies a threesome, he said no. Proceeded to ask if he, the date, wants a kiss, and the answer was positive, so I gave him a long, passionate French kiss in front of my ex. He got furious, I left. The next story is titled, Fire Me While I'm Sick? Say Goodbye to Books. So, I was working at an indie nursery, also known as a daycare, that was owned by a woman who I'll call Ursula. I've always loved kids, and I originally was going into the childcare field. I thought Ursula was a decent, understanding person, but I guess I was wrong. I've been sick with the flu for about a week. She knew this. We also had a team meeting, and I thought things were going fine. That was until yesterday. She texted me, asking if we could talk. She wouldn't go into detail until I let her call. She then said I wasn't a team player and made too many small mistakes. Instead of allowing me to do better or asking what mistakes I made, she just let me go. While I was sick. Now, I have ADHD and autism, so sometimes I do things that people don't understand. Usually, when that happens, the people in charge talk to me and I explain. I told Ursula this, and I thought she understood she needed to talk to me if something happened. I guess she thought this was easier. Now, on to the petty revenge. I'm a gift giver. My love language is gifting. So, I bought things for the nursery. Mainly books. Well, I asked the one coworker who I'm still friendly with if she could gather up the books and some other things I bought for the nursery. I guess Ursula saw this because she texted me. Ursula, why is coworker gathering up books? Me. I asked her to do that. Ursula, why? Me. Because I bought them? Ursula, but you gave them to us. Me. Yeah, but I still bought them. You also never reimbursed me for those items. Ursula, can't you just give them as a gift? Me. No, why would I gift them to someone who fired me? Ursula, but what about the kids? Me. Oh, the kids you didn't even let me say goodbye to? The kids I loved and don't get to ever see again? Ursula, you're being dramatic. Me. I could say the same for you. Stop texting me. She tried texting me a few more times, but I ignored her. I'm letting my coworker, who has a little girl of her own, keep most of the stuff. The next story is titled, Shenanigans on the Office Bully. There was a lady at an office I used to work at that was just an idiot to everyone. She had a small group of 3 other women who constantly seemed to have a different target for their bullying. Unfortunately, it was my turn weeks after I lost my dad and grandparents tragically and unexpectedly. I wasn't in a good place mentally and clearly, they smelled blood in the water. Only a couple of people that I was close with knew details of what happened, and were very supportive. But these grown-ass women would walk by my desk and very loudly say things like, I mean, if she's that miserable, why doesn't she just quit? Or, why does she always look like she's going to cry? The lead bully even approached me outside of work and told me that she thought it was disrespectful that I didn't smile at her when she walked by my desk. I just put my middle finger inches from her face and kept walking. She tried to get me fired for that. Anyway, the friends that I had there were pissed at the way they were treating me, but the HBIC worked for one of the big partners and was close to the office manager. No point in complaining to anyone. So, we hatched a plan to make the lead bully go crazy. We enlisted the help of several others who had a sense of humor and couldn't stand her and them. It's stupid really, but it was hilarious to us. We all made it a point when we were near her to sniff the air and make a face that something smelled bad. Sometimes give her a subtle look like it was her that smelled. The mail guy asked her if she smelled something when she dropped off papers to be scanned. We anonymously left an air freshener on a filing cabinet across from her desk. Little things like that. We kept it up for months, even after I left the job, and would enlist other people when the opportunity arose. We started noticing her smelling her armpits when she thought no one was looking, spraying perfume when she went to the ladies' room, keeping scented lotions on her desk, and maybe unrelated, but she took a day off to go to the doctor. I know it was just small, petty revenge, but it was fun getting in her head like that. The next story is titled, Don't Block My Car In. So, my wife and I live in an old Victorian-style house in a college town split into 2 apartments. Our 2-bedroom downstairs and a 4-bedroom upstairs. The first year, it was occupied by nursing students, who were great. They all finished their rotations and moved out, and we got a set of MBA students who were douches. At first we thought, oh, they're young, we'll politely complain when they don't clean up their dog crap, have a Tuesday night kegger, play COD so loud it rattles our windows, they'll figure it out and it'll be okay. Well, it wasn't. Their response to our requests were annoyance and non-compliance. which opened the door up for me to engage in passive-aggressive revenge tactics, and I have many stories from the year they resided above us. One Monday morning, after a raging party upstairs, I came outside to find my car parked in by the upstairs neighbor my wife had nicknamed Cunt Hammer, CH for short. Now, in the lease we had exclusive use of the driveway. Upstairs we're supposed to park on the street. However, they often parked behind us when street parking was scarce. So, I knocked on the door to get them to move the car so I could go to work. Only there's a problem. CH has left that morning on spring break vacation. He won't be back for 2 weeks. After I had recovered from contemplating exactly how much of a syphilis-ridden wanksock of a human being you would have to be to illegally park in your downstairs neighbor and then leave for 2 weeks, I rang the non-emergency police line and explained my situation. They tried to contact CH to no avail, so my legal recourse was to have the car towed to a legal vacant spot on the street at my own expense, which, given I had to go to work, was what I would have to do. While I was waiting for the tow truck, I hatched a mature and a juvenile revenge plan. Juvenile plan first. I got a bottle of DOT3 brake fluid and a rag out, and utilizing the extent of my artistic abilities, painted a big old cock and balls on the hood with a pew of pee going over the roof, and left it to bake in. The mature part of the plan came to fruition when the tow truck arrived. Our city has a penchant for street sweeping and tows cars enthusiastically when doing so. They had just put up signs down one side of our street notifying that they would be sweeping in 4 days. I reserved a spot that side of the road for CH's car and had the driver put it there. I let him in on the plan as he was contracted to tow cars for the city that day. He giggled a lot at my slowly emerging cock and balls artwork and said he'd try and pick up CH's car early, knowing that if he was away for 2 weeks, his company would be able to rack up a nice storage fee. The day came, and the tow driver who moved the car came straight to CH's car and towed it. I had dropped a note in CH's letterbox explaining, without being rude, that he had parked me in and I had to have his car moved at my expense so I could go to work. Cue him coming back and furiously pounding on my door. "Where's my ducking car?" he demanded. I explained I had moved it to the other side of the street into a legal car space because neither the police nor I could contact him. The city had swept the street last Thursday. They had towed it. He'd need to call the city. He stormed off, furious, only to return a few hours later. Apparently the combination of the city's fine, the tow fee, and 10 days storage totaled over $1,000. And his car had been hilariously vandalized at the tow yard. He demanded I pay. I politely declined, suggesting that he might try small claims court if he could demonstrate I'd done anything I was liable for. He never took me up on the offer. The artwork had come out great. The car had been left in the rain, so the giant prick on the hood of his beat-up Civic had rusted in. Apparently, it even earned him the nickname Prick Wheels in class. The next story is titled Revenge for a Nightmare Year. When I, 27M, was 18 years old, I was a cook at a pub. I worked with this 30-year-old man who was also a cook. He used to bully me a lot. He was the new cook who was quick to condescend me, make fun, and just wasn't nice to me. And only me. He treated everyone else respectfully. I worked with him for a year, and every day was the same. I started dreading going in. He would brag a lot about his Japanese imported knife, and he got me to clean it for him. I ended up dropping it by accident, and he blew up at me, calling me names, and harassed me more than usual for the rest of the day. He also bragged about his Volkswagen Bug. He loved that bug. I talked to my boss about him, so he scheduled us to not work together. I worked morning shift and he worked the night shift. I couldn't completely get away from him because we had to work together when transitioning from morning to night shift. One day, I was just ending my morning shift and he was starting his night shift. Before I was leaving, he pretended to stab me with his knife. I was shocked and told him not to do that. He laughed at me and thought it was funny. I got mad. That was the last straw. When I got home, my mom and her boyfriend knew I was mad, and they asked what happened. I told them, and my mom's boyfriend had the idea to grab dog poo from the backyard and smear it on his Volkswagen door handle and vents. In a fit of rage, I was willing to do anything to get a little revenge for the past year. At the time, the idea sounded brilliant. So, I grabbed a plastic bag, picked up the poop, and drove to his car. I smeared his door handles and vents and took off back home. The next day, everybody at work heard the story and asked if it was me. I denied everything, and nobody could prove it was me. He left me alone after that, and I quit shortly after. The next story is titled, Stop Browsing Porn. Back in the late 90s, I worked for a small construction company as the office manager. My background was as a computer programmer, and this was the job I had when I finished school. The owner of the company hired his son to be the company's safety officer. A very non-strenuous job if everything was being done properly, and as far as safety went, he was good at it. But most of the time he spent sitting in his office browsing the internet, or in his case, porn. I knew it, his father knew it, and the vice president knew it, but nothing was said beyond my comments that those sites were loaded with viruses. Cue maliciousness. One day, the safety officer went to a job site, leaving his computer up, and signed in. My chance. I went into his office and took a screenshot of his computer desktop, moved his start button to the side of the screen, and setting it to hide. Set his background image to a blank screen, and turned off his icons. Then set back to see what would happen. He came back to the office, sat down to play a game of solitaire, and panic ensued. I let him worry over it for 10 to 15 minutes before I came in, looked over things, and proceeded to read him the riot act over how he had been told multiple times about going to those sites, especially on his work laptop. About that time, his father, the company owner, who was in on my scheme, asked what was wrong. I angrily explained that his son had gotten the ID10T virus by surfing porn sites, to which Dad read his son the riot act. We let him stew for a couple of hours while I worked on his laptop, played solitaire, occasionally muttering loudly what a dumbass he was, couldn't follow instructions, etc. Finally, I brought his laptop back to him, saying his system was toast, to which his father replied that it was coming out of his pay. The look on his face was priceless. Then, I sat it down in front of him, everything running perfectly, and a new high score on solitaire showing on the screen. I miss working there. Unfortunately, the owner sold the company to a third-party management firm that ran it into the ground and sold everything it could and shut the company down. The last story is titled, Can I Get Some Love from This Sub for this one? Hi guys, I'm a teacher and times are tough for us. I'm going to keep specifics out, but I would really appreciate some love if possible. It's been a rough week. A few years ago, my teaching department, 4 including me, kind of ganged up on me. Decided I didn't fit into their friend group or whatever and started talking crap and whatnot. I work in a high school, so I was used to this, but it usually came from the kids. Not going to act like I wasn't hurt, because I was. I thought of these people as friends, and they were being petty and rude. Many comments were made about how I was a bad teacher, etc., but after being mad, I tried to move on and consider them coworkers instead of friends. About a year ago, the state announced a new incentive for teachers. If you achieved this ranking from the state, you got a monetary bonus for the next few years and could obviously add the title to your resume. I decided then and there to work my ass off to get the title. I wanted to prove to my department that I was a good teacher. Obviously, I had money and achievement to gain too, but I really wanted to be the only teacher in my department to get it, so they couldn't argue with it. So, I worked. I put in the hours, and I did everything required. We all worked for it. It's a lot of stuff to do, but I had a childish part that wanted to do it better. Anyway, the rankings came out today. I scored highest in my department, and only one other one got the bonus. The 2 that ran their mouths the most about me, they got nothing. Obviously, they are now pissed and saying that the system is screwed up and yada yada yada. I know it's not so much revenge, maybe, but I did it, and they didn't. Today, I won. I hope you all get your win too.
The next one is an entitled people story.
My daughter is 14 years old. I'll call her Rosie to maintain privacy. She's the middle child of 4 kids, with my oldest sons being 16, 18, and youngest son is 10. She's my only daughter. She has high-functioning autism and is starting to model some of the boys' behavior and to the next level. She has some sort of a fart fetish. She laughs at farts, looks up every fact on farting, including foods that trigger gas, etc., watches fart pranks on her iPad out loud, all without any regard to the context of the situation. I wish I was joking. I have taught her and our sons table manners. I've been teaching them and reinforcing them since they were little. They were told to say "excuse me" when they belch, cover their mouth when they cough and sneeze, close their mouth when they eat, very basic table manners. Some of these things I tell her each time, it's like I told her the first time. Their grandparents, aunt and uncle, and their younger cousins were invited over to our Thanksgiving dinner. I set expectations with the entire family to be on their best behavior and leave topics regarding bodily functions out of the dinner table. Dinner underway, she gulped down a cup of lemonade and then proceeded to belch a few times, which the family turned to gaze at her. I reminded her to say, "Excuse me," and hold in her burps. In the middle of a discussion with the rest of the family, she passed gas and giggled. The entire family looked at her direction with stern gazes and some jaw drops. It was after the third time I threw my hands and shook my head at her, telling her to go to her room and that her actions were disgusting, rude, and not ladylike, and she needs to excuse herself to do that. Her father smirked a little and some of the little ones giggled, which I told them, enough. It's not funny. My daughter apologized and stated that she will be careful, which I then responded that she had the multiple times you belched, smacked during the entire dinner, and farted, she had more than enough time to correct herself. This is unacceptable to be doing this behavior when people are having a meal, and I raised her better than this, and we will have this conversation later, and for now, go to her room. She went to her room in tears. After a conversation with my daughter with the behaviors, she apologized again and said that she was trying to make everyone laugh and didn't expect people to get mad. I did remind her that it was actually rude and she's expected to not do that again with company over. After a conversation with my husband, who passes gas very casually, thankfully doesn't do it with company over, he said that I was being too harsh on her and it was just a fart, which I did call him out on him smirking at dinner and stated that she modeled her behavior from him. A part of me agreed with him and thought I was too harsh on her and made a big deal over nothing. Was I being too hard on her, Reddit? Am I the a-hole? Comment said, not the a-hole. After a conversation with my daughter with the behaviors, she apologized again and said that she was trying to make everyone laugh and didn't expect people to get mad. This right here is why I came to this decision. You need to make sure she understands that there is a time and place for everything, and very often what she finds hilarious may be very offensive for someone else. With your husband giving you crap for it, I'd say turn it back on him. Ask him how he'd feel if he was at his parents' funerals and someone rudely farted in an effort to be funny. I know that's a harsh way to put it, but it seems part of the issue is your husband doesn't seem to grasp how offensive that behavior can be. Another comment said, not the a-hole. Some people think farts are funny, some don't. In my opinion, it is never funny to fart, or hear, or smell a fart when at a dining table. So, I don't think you are the a-hole for telling her to stop and sending her away from the table, because, as you pointed out, she had numerous chances to contain her belches, but she didn't, and she chose to up the ante and fart to get attention. Pure and simple. And by calling her out like you did, it has her attention. Negative attention, but attention nonetheless. I think you could have corrected her differently in a way that she would remember, but without seeming so harsh. Neurodivergent or not, I'm sure she knew it was wrong and simply kept misbehaving until she was the focus of attention. You also need to get your husband on board to model appropriate behavior, since she seems to be following in his farting footsteps, and even if he conforms, he needs to not smirk or laugh at all, because that encourages her misbehavior. The next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my fiancé's family that he's unemployed after they kept implying that I was a gold digger? So, my fiancé, M, 33, comes from a well-off family. I, F, 29, come from a working-class family. My fiancé's family are nice, but they can't help throwing comments at me about how I might be a gold digger. For example, if he buys me something, they'll go, "Oh, Jason bought you that?" You know what this looks like, right? And or, wait, Jason paid for this? Only gold diggers make their partners pay for stuff all the time. Just saying. It's so demeaning, and my fiancé does nothing to stop it. Especially now that he's in a bad place in life after he lost his job. And since he's keeping it secret then, I'm the one paying for everything. This has been going on for 4 months. Last week, his parents invited us for dinner, and he insisted that we go, so we went. At the dinner table, his mom grabbed my hand, literally while I was eating, and looked at my bracelet and went, "Oh, this bracelet looks really nice. Did Jason pay for it?" I nodded and reminded her that he bought it for me as a birthday gift last year. She was like, wonder how much it costs. She then leaned back and said, "You know, I remember when my brother was dating this gold digger woman. She'd receive expensive stuff like this," pointing at the bracelet here for her birthdays. I was stunned. I cut her off and asked if she meant to say that I was a gold digger. She threw her hands up and went, "I mean, if the shoe fits," while laughing awkwardly. Silence took over. I looked at my fiancé and he shook his head at me like, "What?" I snapped. I told her it was bold of her to imply I was a gold digger when I'm literally providing for her unemployed son, have been for 4 months now. They all looked shocked. She glanced at me in shock, and his dad asked if it was true, and my fiancé just froze but looked so angry. An argument ensued, and dinner was cut short, and we had to leave after they started berating him. He had a rage fit in the car, just yelling and lashing at me. In my defense, I said that he sat by and let his mom continually imply that I was a gold digger, but he said that they never outright called me a gold digger, so it was all in my head. He said I still had no right to take advantage of his unfortunate circumstance to get back at his mom and expose him to the family. His parents went on about how disappointed they were, and now, as a result, he got disinvited from Thanksgiving. He blew up at me because of it this morning and kept saying I screwed him over so badly when he was just an innocent bystander. Comments said, not the a-hole. I think you should uninvite your fiancé from your wedding. He doesn't have your back. He's willing to lie to his family for months to protect his reputation. He's going to be willing to lie to you, too. And this won't be the last time he blames you for the faults and actions of himself and others. Another comment said, not the a-hole. I have to ask, do you see a future with this guy? He has no loyalty to you and is content to sit by and let his family disrespect you. When they get angry with him, it's your fault. Imagine how much worse this dynamic will be if you have children with him. He will allow his family to treat you like crap and teach your kids that you are unworthy of respect and dignity. I'd toss him before he makes your life a misery. The next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my mother that she and her step-grandchildren are not part of my family and are not owed money? My mother had me with a sperm donor. He was someone she knew who was willing to let her have a child to raise herself. When I was 12, Mom met her husband. Her husband had a 17-year-old daughter at the time. Her husband and his daughter were dicks, and Mom threw me in the deep end, and she thought I'd see this dude as my dad because I never had one before. Even at 12, I knew a guy who commented on how I didn't smile like a girl should, and who commented on my weird interests for a girl was never going to be worthy of being called my parent, let alone my dad. His daughter taunted me for having no dad, and for not being cute enough when my donor didn't fall in love with me and decide to be my dad. I asked her if she understood what a sperm donor was. She told me someone who makes freaks. When I was 16, her husband's daughters moved back in with her boyfriend and their kids. I was then forced to babysit after school, and sometimes on the weekends because they either couldn't be bothered or nobody wanted to pay. I did the bare minimum of babysitting, and I did not grow attached to those children in the townish years I babysat them. I wanted nothing to do with babysitting them, but figured I could at least game when home with them rather than being grounded. I moved out and cut my mom off because she chose a husband who was a dick to me and kept me around him and his daughter, who was also a dick to me. I have nothing to do with any of them. A few months ago, my sperm donor died, and I learned he left all his assets to me. It was a lot of money, and a house that I sold, which got me a lot of money. My mom learned about this via mutual friends, and she reached out and told me how much they have struggled financially since their house burned down 2 years ago. I had heard about that at the time, and how her step-grandkids are looking at a really bad Christmas, and how great it would be if I, as their aunt, her daughter, and part of the family, bought gifts for the kids. I told her she and her step-grandkids are not my family, and were not owed any money from me, and that I would like it if she did not make me change another number. She called me on a business number I have. She asked me, how could I be so cold? And even if I resent her, how could I say that about the niece and nephew I spent every day with for 2 years and who looked up to and adored me? Am I the a-hole? Comment said, not the a-hole. All of a sudden, out of the blue, your mom contacts you after she conveniently hears about how you came into a lot of money courtesy of your sperm donor. I'm guessing she hasn't tried to contact you prior to this. How her step-grandkids are looking at a really bad Christmas, and how great it would be if I, as their aunt, her daughter, and part of the family brought gifts for the kids. Jeebus, lay it on thicker, Mom. So she was willing to submit you to years of mistreatment from your stepsister and stepdad along with her, but as soon as you come into cash, you're part of the family. Convenient. She asked me how I could be so cold. I'd ask her how she could have stayed with a man and his daughter who treated you like such crap over the years. How could I say that about the niece and nephew I spent every day with for 2 years? Well, considering you were forced to babysit for them by your family, I think you've given them enough over the years. Maybe total up the cash they saved by having you watch them for your sister and her BF. Good on you to stand your ground, OP. Use the money on you, not on people who wanted nothing to do with you until you all of a sudden came into money. Another comment said, not the a-hole. Isn't it amazing how people who treat you the worst suddenly become such devoted family members when they want your money? I'm very glad your dad remembered you and left you a legacy, and I hope you made solid arrangements with it for your future. One hint. If you haven't yet, please get a will written immediately. If you don't, your mom may qualify as next of kin and be able to take it all if anything happens to you. Build your own future and family of choice and have a great life. The last story is titled Racist Against the Owner. The cast. Me, EJ, entitled Jerk, and IS, important son. I work at a popular high-priced restaurant, and we get new employees often, but the owner, who is also the general manager, hired some new faces, and he put me in charge of them. I'm not a manager, and the actual managers that were working with me made it clear that they were putting the responsibility of EJ onto me. Immediately, I didn't like this EJ. He was unprofessional and rude, but when he found out he was older than me, all respect went out the window. I'm a rather short, chunky girl, and he belittled me on my weight as well as my age. EJ was also racist and homophobic to me as well, and let other staff and guests know his opinions very aggressively. On to why he was fired. The owner of the restaurant next door is friends with the owner of the restaurant I work at. They're business partners and have corporate ties with each other. This is where IS comes in. IS is the son of the owner next door. IS, his father, and my general manager are on a poster in the back room. The family has owned restaurants for years. I don't know their race, but I know they're from overseas. I don't know where exactly, but I'm assuming Israel. Anyway, they have a thick accent, and sometimes it's hard to understand them the first try. IS walked in, and I had a difficult time understanding his accent, and after a few minutes of trying to understand each other, we got his order in. EJ got annoyed listening to my conversation and started making comments like, learn English, and mumbling while making ugh sounds. IS heard this and layered on his accent, making it even harder and playing it up while asking EJ questions about our food. EJ was noticeably pissed off and started yelling racist and anti-immigrant things at IS. He ended his rant with, if I was the owner, I'd ban all towel heads like you. IS perked up and in almost perfect English with little detectable accent said, I am the owner. EJ went off again, claiming how he was lying until he realized IS was one of the co-owners. You would expect an apology, right? One last-ditch effort to save your job? Not from EJ. He then claimed that it wasn't fair for IS to be a co-owner because it was taking away a job from Americans. IS smiled very big and asked me to write a witness report while he called my general manager and his dad. The next day, EJ was gone, and I hopefully never have to deal with him again. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.